the dusty streets of redemption. Texas had never seen a scandal quite like the one brewing on that scorching July afternoon in 1878, when Evangeline Porter stepped off the afternoon stage with nothing but a worn carpetbag and the kind of reputation that made decent women cross to the other side of the street. She had arrived without warning, without invitation, and most damningly, without a husband, despite the rounded swell of her belly that even her traveling cloak could not entirely conceal. The stage driver had barely helped her down before the whispers started, spreading through the small frontier town like wildfire through dry grass. By the time Evangeline's dusty boots touched the wooden planks of Main Street, half the town already knew her story, or at least the version that had traveled ahead of her in letters from concerned relatives back east. Evangeline Porter, age 22, daughter of a respected Boston merchant, had been engaged to marry the son of another wealthy family. But 3 months before the wedding, the young man had died in a riding accident, and Evangeline had discovered she was carrying his child. The scandal had been immediate and brutal. His family, instead of offering support, had turned their backs, claiming she must have entrapped their precious son. Her own family, mortified by the shame, had sent her west to live with her mother's spinster sister in redemption, hoping distance would bury the disgrace. But Aunt Martha had died 2 weeks before Evangeline's arrival, leaving the young woman stranded in a hostile town with nowhere to go and no one to vouch for her character. The hotel proprietor took one look at her condition and the absence of a wedding ring before shaking his head. "We don't have any rooms available," he said, though Evangeline could clearly see the keyboard behind him, fully laden with unclaimed keys. "Please," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I have money. I can pay in advance." "No rooms," he repeated firmly and shut the door in her face. Evangeline stood on the boardwalk, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes upon her. The sun beat down mercilessly, and she felt dizzy with heat and exhaustion after 3 weeks of traveling by train and stage. She needed water, shade, and rest, but it seemed redemption was determined to offer her none of those things. She tried the boarding house next, but Mrs. Cunningham answered the door with a face like granite. "I run a respectable establishment," the older woman said coldly. "I'll not have the moral character of my other guests compromised by housing a woman of your sort." "My sort?" Evangeline's temper flared despite her exhaustion. "You know nothing about me." "I know enough," Mrs. Cunningham sniffed. "Traveling alone in your condition without a husband. The very sight of you is an affront to decent Christian women." The door closed with a definitive thud, and Evangeline felt tears prick at her eyes for the first time since leaving Boston. She would not cry. She had not cried when Thomas died, had not cried when his family accused her of being a fortune hunter, had not cried when her own father told her she had brought shame upon their name. She would not cry now, but where was she supposed to go? She made her way to the general store, hoping at least to buy some food and water. The store was busy with afternoon shoppers, mostly women gathering supplies. The moment Evangeline walked in, conversation stopped as abruptly as if someone had fired a gunshot. Every eye turned to her, and the judgment in those stares was palpable. Evangeline held her head high and walked to the counter, where the shopkeeper, a balding man with wire-rimmed spectacles, looked at her with barely concealed distaste. "I need some provisions," she said quietly. "Bread, cheese, dried meat if you have it, and water." "We don't serve your kind here," the shopkeeper said loudly, clearly playing to his audience. "My kind." Evangeline felt her exhaustion transforming into anger. "I am a paying customer with money in my purse." "What possible reason could you have for refusing my business?" The reason is standing plain as day. A sharp-voiced woman spoke up from near the fabric bolts. We don't cater to women with loose morals. You're not welcome in redemption. You know nothing about my morals or my circumstances, Evangeline said, her voice rising despite her best efforts to remain calm. You have judged me without knowing a single fact about my life or my character. The facts are evident enough, another woman chimed in. No ring, no husband, and a belly full of bastard child. What more do we need to know? The crude words hit Evangeline like a physical blow, and she instinctively put a protective hand over her stomach. How dare you speak of an innocent child that way? How dare any of you stand in judgment when you know nothing of what I have endured? We know enough, the shopkeeper said. Now leave before I have the sheriff remove you. Evangeline wanted to fight, wanted to rage at the injustice of it all, but she could see it was hopeless. These people had made up their minds about her before she ever arrived. She turned and walked out of the store, acutely aware of the satisfied murmurs that followed her departure. Outside, the heat seemed even more oppressive. Evangeline felt the world tilt slightly, and she grabbed hold of a post to steady herself. She had not eaten since early morning, and her water had run out hours ago. The baby inside her kicked as if in protest of these harsh conditions, and Evangeline felt a surge of fierce protectiveness. Whatever happened to her, she would protect this child, the last piece of Thomas she had left in the world. But how was she supposed to do that when the entire town had apparently decided to drive her out? She sank down onto a bench outside the shuttered post office, trying to think. Aunt Martha's house should have been hers to claim, at least temporarily. Perhaps if she could just get there, she could have a roof over her head while she figured out what to do next. But she had no idea where the house was, and she was not about to ask any of these hostile townspeople for directions. Miss, are you all right? The voice was young, female, and surprisingly kind. Evangeline looked up to find a girl of perhaps 16 standing before her, concern evident on her pretty face. She wore a simple calico dress and had dark hair pulled back in a practical braid. I am fine, Evangeline said automatically, though they both knew it was a lie. You don't look fine. You look about ready to faint from the heat. The girl glanced around nervously, as if checking to make sure no one was watching, then sat down beside Evangeline. My name is Sarah. Sarah Coleman. You're the lady from back east, aren't you? The one who was supposed to stay with Martha Porter. I am Evangeline Porter. Martha was my aunt. She studied the girl's face. You are the first person in this town to show me any kindness. Sarah bit her lip. Most folks here are good people, truly. But they can be awful quick to judge, and they hold tight to their judgments once they've made them. I heard what folks were saying about you, and I am sorry for it. It is not Christian to treat a stranger so poorly, no matter what the circumstances. Thank you, Evangeline said, and meant it. Do you happen to know where my aunt's house is? I was hoping I might be able to stay there, at least until I can make other arrangements. Sarah's face fell. Oh, miss, I am afraid that won't be possible. When Miss Martha died without any heirs present to claim the property, the bank took possession. They have already sold it to the Hendersons, and they moved in just last week. Evangeline felt what little hope she had been clinging to crumble away. I see. Look, I cannot invite you to my house because my pa would have a fit and my ma would be scandalized, but I can at least get you some food and water. Sarah stood up decisively. You wait right here and I will be back in just a few minutes. Before Evangeline could protest, the girl hurried off down the street. True to her word, she returned shortly with a bundle wrapped in cloth and a canteen of water. It is not much, Sarah said apologetically. Just some biscuits and ham, but it should help. Evangeline took the offerings with trembling hands, too grateful to be proud. Thank you, Sarah. You have shown me more Christian charity than anyone else in this entire town. I wish I could do more, Sarah said earnestly. I truly do. But folks here, when they get an idea in their heads about something, it is powerful hard to shift them. They have already decided you are a fallen woman, and nothing you say is going to change their minds. Then what am I supposed to do? Evangeline heard the desperation in her own voice. Where am I supposed to go? Sarah shook her head helplessly. I don't know, miss, I truly don't. But you should eat that food and drink that water before you collapse. You are looking awful pale. She was right. Evangeline forced herself to eat the biscuits and ham, though her stomach was so knotted with anxiety she could barely swallow. The water helped, at least, clearing some of the foggy feeling from her head. As she ate, she became aware of a group of men gathering across the street, talking in low voices and occasionally glancing in her direction. The looks on their faces were not friendly. Sarah, she said quietly, who are those men? Sarah followed her gaze and her expression tightened with worry. That is the mayor, Herbert Watkins, and some of the town council members. And that tall fellow with the black beard is Reverend Blackwood. Oh, miss, this does not look good. Indeed, the group was now crossing the street, heading directly toward them. Sarah jumped to her feet, clearly torn between loyalty to this stranger and fear of being associated with a woman the town had condemned. You should go, Evangeline said quietly. You have already done more than enough, and I would not want you to suffer for showing me kindness. Sarah hesitated only a moment before squeezing Evangeline's shoulder and hurrying away. Evangeline stood to face the approaching men, drawing on reserves of strength she was not sure she possessed. The mayor spoke first, a portly man with mutton chops and an air of self-importance. Miss Porter, I am Mayor Watkins, and this is Reverend Blackwood and members of our town council. We have come to inform you that you are not welcome in redemption. So I have gathered, Evangeline said coolly. Though I fail to see what authority you have to ban someone from a town simply because you disapprove of their circumstances. We have every authority to protect the moral character of our community. Reverend Blackwood intoned in a deep, sonorous voice clearly accustomed to delivering sermons. Your presence here is a corrupting influence, particularly on our young people. We cannot have our daughters seeing a woman like you and thinking such behavior is acceptable. A woman like me, Evangeline felt her temper rising again. You mean a woman who loved a man and lost him to tragedy? A woman who now carries his child and is trying to make the best of impossible circumstances. That is the corrupting influence you fear. We know the real story, one of the council members said. We had letters from your family back east. You entrapped that poor young man, got yourself with child to force a marriage, and when he died before you could spring your trap, his family saw through your scheme. Now you have come here hoping to practice your wiles on some unsuspecting cowboy or rancher. The accusation was so outrageous, so utterly divorced from the truth, that Evangeline could only stare in disbelief. That is a lie, all of it. Thomas and I were engaged to be married. We loved each other. His death destroyed me, and discovering I carried his child was the only light in that darkness. His family turned on me because they could not bear to admit their perfect son would have relations with his fiancée before the wedding. They needed someone to blame, and I was convenient. So you admit to fornication, Reverend Blackwood said triumphantly, as if she had just confessed to murder. I admit to being human, Evangeline shot back, to being young and in love and perhaps foolish. But I will not stand here and be lectured on morality by men who would turn away a pregnant woman with nowhere to go, who would deny me food and shelter and basic human decency. Where is your Christian charity? Where is your compassion? Our charity does not extend to rewarding sinful behavior, the Reverend said coldly. You made your choices, and now you must live with the consequences. The consequence of loving someone. Evangeline felt tears threatening again but refused to let them fall. The consequence of having that love create new life. Is that really so terrible a sin in your eyes? The sin is in the lack of marriage vows, Mayor Watkins said. And the fact remains, Miss Porter, that we do not want you here. We are prepared to escort you to the evening stage and ensure you leave redemption. And go where? Evangeline demanded. I have nowhere else to go. I came here because my aunt was the only family willing to take me in, and now I find she is dead. I have no money for endless travel, no destination waiting for me. Would you truly put a pregnant woman on a stage with no idea where she will end up? That is not our concern, the mayor said flatly. You should have thought of that before you found yourself in this condition. Evangeline opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, a new voice cut through the tension. Now that is about enough. Everyone turned to see a man striding toward them from the direction of the stables. He was tall, lean, and sun-bronzed, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of a summer sky. He wore the practical clothing of a working cowboy, dusty chaps over worn denim, a faded blue shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. There was a quiet confidence in his walk, and something in his expression suggested he was not a man who would tolerate fools easily. Evangeline had never seen him before, but something about his presence made her heart beat faster. This is none of your concern, Jackson, Mayor Watkins said, his tone dismissive. I am making it my concern, the cowboy replied evenly. He stopped a few feet from their group, his gaze moving from the mayor to Evangeline and back again. I just heard what you all are trying to do, and I am here to say it is not happening. Jackson Wade, you have no authority here, Reverend Blackwood said sternly. This is a matter for the town council and the moral leaders of this community. Moral leaders, Jackson repeated, and there was an edge of contempt in his voice. Is that what you call yourselves? Because from where I stand, what you are doing here is about as far from moral as a man can get. How dare you, the Reverend sputtered. No, how dare you, Jackson shot back. You are standing here, a bunch of self-righteous hypocrites, trying to run a pregnant woman out of town because you have decided she is not good enough for your precious community. Well, I have news for you. This town is not half as righteous as you seem to think it is. Jackson, I am warning you, Mayor Watkins said. Do not involve yourself in this matter. Too late. I am already involved. Jackson turned to look at Evangeline, and she saw kindness in those blue eyes, along with a determination that made her breath catch. Miss, I don't believe we have been introduced. My name is Jackson Wade. I run a cattle ranch about 5 miles outside of town. Evangeline Porter, she managed, bewildered by this sudden intervention. Miss Porter, I have a proposition for you if you will hear it. He spoke clearly, loudly enough that everyone present could hear every word. I am in need of a wife. Have been for some time now, truth be told. A ranch is a lonely place for a single man, and I could use a woman's touch around the house. Now, I know we are strangers to each other, and this is about as sudden as things can get, but I am a decent man with a decent living, and I would be honored if you would agree to marry me. The silence that followed this declaration was absolute. Evangeline stared at him, certain she must have misheard. The mayor and reverend looked equally stunned. Even the other council members seemed at a loss for words. You cannot be serious, Reverend Blackwood finally sputtered. I am completely serious, Jackson said calmly. Miss Porter is in need of a husband and a home. I am in need of a wife. Seems like a practical solution to both our problems. But you don't even know her, the mayor protested. Don't need to know her to see she is being treated poorly by people who ought to know better, Jackson replied. And I know enough about her already. She has got courage, standing up to you all the way she has been. She has got pride, refusing to break down even when you have done your best to crush her. And she has got that baby to think about, which tells me she understands responsibility. That is more than I can say for most women. This is absurd, Reverend Blackwood declared. Marriage is a sacred institution, not something to be entered into on a whim to make a point. Who says I am making a point? Jackson turned his attention back to Evangeline. Miss Porter, I mean what I say. I am offering you marriage and with it my name, my home, and my protection. That baby you are carrying will be raised as mine, with no questions asked and no judgment passed. In return, I would ask that you try to make a home with me and that you give this arrangement an honest chance. I am not asking for love. I have lived this long without it and I reckon I can continue to do so. But I am asking for honesty, respect, and a fair partnership. What do you say? Evangeline's mind raced. This was madness. She did not know this man, had never even seen him before this moment. Everything she had been taught about proper behavior screamed that she should refuse, that accepting such an offer was reckless and improper. But what choice did she have? The town had made it clear she was not welcome. She had no money to go anywhere else, no prospects, no options. In a few hours, she would be forced onto a stage heading to nowhere, with a baby on the way and winter coming in a few months. How was she supposed to survive? And there was something in Jackson Wade's eyes, something honest and true that made her want to trust him. He was offering her a lifeline, asking for nothing more than a chance in return. Why? She asked quietly. Why would you do this for a stranger? He considered the question seriously before answering. My mother was a good woman who made one mistake when she was young. The man she loved left her, and she was pregnant with me when she arrived in a new town looking for help. The people there treated her the way this town is treating you. She died when I was 12, worn down by years of struggle and judgment. I swore then that if I ever had the chance to help someone in a similar situation, I would do it. So that is why, Miss Porter, because someone should have helped my mother and no one did, I will not make that same mistake. The sincerity in his voice brought tears to Evangeline's eyes. This stranger, this cowboy she had never met, was offering her more compassion and understanding than her own family had shown. Yes, she said before she could second-guess herself. Yes, I will marry you. Jackson's face broke into a smile that transformed his entire countenance, making him almost heartbreakingly handsome. Well then, that is settled. He turned back to the mayor and Reverend. Reverend Blackwood, I believe you are equipped to perform a marriage ceremony. How about you make yourself useful and marry us right now? Absolutely not, the Reverend said firmly. I will not perform a mockery of a marriage to make some kind of statement about social justice. It is not a mockery, and it is not a statement, Jackson said, his voice taking on a harder edge. It is two people entering into a legal marriage contract. You are an ordained minister. You have the authority to perform this ceremony, and unless you can give me a legal reason why you cannot, I expect you to do your job. There are proprieties to observe, the Reverend blustered. Bans to be posted, licenses to be obtained. We can ride to the county seat and get a license, Jackson said. But that is a full day's journey there and back, and Miss Porter needs a home and protection now, not tomorrow. So you can marry us now with the understanding we will make it legal with the county as soon as possible. Or you can explain to the whole town why you refuse to perform a marriage ceremony for two willing adults. The Reverend looked to the mayor for support, but Watkins just shrugged helplessly. There was a glint of something like anger in the Reverend's eyes, but he clearly recognized he was beaten. "Fine," he said tersely, "but do not expect me to bless this union. I will speak the words required by law, nothing more." "That is all I am asking," Jackson said. And so, on a dusty street in Redemption, Texas, with the sun beating down and a hostile crowd gathering to watch, Evangeline Porter married a man whose last name she would now share but whose first name she had learned only minutes before. The ceremony was brief and cold, Reverend Blackwood racing through the words as if they burned his tongue. There were no flowers, no music, no celebration. Just two strangers standing side by side while a bitter old man bound their lives together with words spoken in anger rather than joy. When it came time for the vows, Jackson spoke as clearly and firmly, his eyes never leaving Evangeline's face. She repeated the words in a voice that shook only slightly, acutely aware that she was binding herself to a complete stranger and hoping desperately that her instincts about his character were correct. "You have a ring?" Reverend Blackwood asked Jackson with barely concealed disdain. Jackson hesitated for only a moment before pulling off a simple gold band from his own smallest finger. "This was my mother's," he said quietly to Evangeline. "It is not much, but it is yours now if you will have it." The gesture touched her deeply. She held out her hand and he slipped the ring onto her finger. It was slightly too large, but she closed her fist to keep it in place. "By the power vested in me by the state of Texas, I pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Blackwood said flatly. "May God have mercy on you both." With that less than enthusiastic blessing, the ceremony was complete. Evangeline was now Mrs. Jackson Wade, wife to a cowboy she had met less than an hour ago, bound to him legally and socially for the rest of their lives. Jackson turned to her with that same gentle smile. "Well, Mrs. Wade, shall we go home, Mrs. Wade?" The name sounded foreign to her ears, but not unpleasant. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Jackson retrieved her carpetbag from where she had left it by the bench, then offered her his arm. She took it, grateful for the support as her knees felt decidedly weak. Together, they walked away from the gathered crowd, ignoring the whispers and stares that followed them. "I have a wagon waiting at the livery," Jackson said conversationally, as if they had not just participated in the strangest wedding ceremony Redemption had likely ever witnessed. "It is about an hour's drive to the ranch. Are you feeling well enough to travel, or would you like to rest first?" "I just want to leave this town," Evangeline admitted. "The sooner the better. Can't say I blame you. They did not exactly roll out the welcome mat." He helped her up onto the wagon seat, handling her as carefully as if she were made of glass, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. As they drove out of Redemption, Evangeline looked back once at the town that had rejected her so completely. She saw the crowd still gathered on the street, watching them leave. Among them, she spotted young Sarah Coleman, who raised one hand in a small wave. Evangeline waved back, grateful for that one small kindness. Then she turned her face forward, toward whatever future awaited her with this stranger who was now her husband. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon wheels and the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves. The landscape around them was rough and beautiful, all rolling hills covered in prairie grass that glowed golden in the afternoon sun. In the distance, Evangeline could see a line of dark trees that suggested a river or creek. "It is pretty country," she said finally, breaking the silence. "It is," Jackson agreed. "Harsh sometimes, especially in winter or during a dry summer, but yes, it is pretty. I have always loved this land." "How long have you had your ranch?" "About 6 years now. I worked as a cowhand for 10 years before that, saving every penny I could. When the previous owner decided to sell and move back east, I had just enough to make him an offer. It is not the biggest spread in Texas, but it is mine, and I have built it up from near nothing to something I am proud of." There was satisfaction in his voice, and Evangeline found herself curious about this man she had married. "Do you run it alone?" "I have 2 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse. Charlie is an older fellow, been working cattle his whole life. Good man, steady and reliable. And then there is Miguel, who is younger but knows his way around horses better than anyone I have ever met. They are both trustworthy, and they will treat you with respect." Evangeline appreciated the reassurance, though it raised another question. "How do you think they will react to you bringing home a wife so suddenly?" Jackson's lips quirked in a small smile. "Charlie will probably say something about it being about time I settled down. Miguel will be his usual polite self. Neither of them will ask questions they have got no business asking, if that is what you are worried about." It was, though Evangeline had not wanted to say so outright. "And what should I tell them if they do ask how we met?" "The truth," Jackson said simply. "We met today in town. We got married. We are making a go of it. That is all anyone needs to know. People will talk," Evangeline said quietly. "About the baby, about the timing, they will count the months. Let them talk. I don't much care what people say, and you shouldn't either. Far as anyone needs to know, that baby is mine. We can say we met a few months back when you came to visit your aunt, and I courted you proper. When your aunt died and you came back, we decided not to wait any longer. That is close enough to the truth that it will be easy to remember, and it gives folks a story they can swallow if they need one." Evangeline looked at him with growing admiration. "You have thought this through." "I have had a few minutes," he said wryly. "And like I said, this is not the first time I have seen how cruel people can be to a woman in your situation. I figured we would need a story that protected you and the baby." "Why do you keep doing that?" Evangeline asked. "Doing what? Including the baby when you talk about protection? You have made it clear this is a practical arrangement, and yet you speak of raising this child as your own. Why?" Jackson was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the horizon. "Because every child deserves a father," he said finally. "And because I meant what I said. You accept my name, I accept all that comes with you. That includes the baby. Simple as that." It was not simple, though. It was extraordinary. Evangeline felt something shift in her chest, a warmth she had not expected. This man, this stranger, was offering her child the legitimacy and protection that Thomas's own family had denied. How could she not be moved by that? "Thank you," she said softly. "You have no idea what this means to me." "Maybe I do," Jackson replied. "My mother spent my whole childhood being judged and scorned because I did not have a father's name to claim. I know what that does to a person. Your child will not face that. I will make sure of it." Evangeline felt tears slip down her cheeks, the first she had allowed herself to shed since this entire ordeal began. These were not tears of despair, though, but of relief and gratitude and something else she could not quite name. Jackson glanced over and saw her crying. Concern immediately crossed his face. "Are you all right? Do you need me to stop the wagon?" "No, I am fine," Evangeline said, wiping at her eyes. "Truly I am. These are good tears, I think, or at least better than the alternative." He seemed to accept this, though he kept glancing at her as if to make sure she was not about to fall apart. "We are almost there," he said after a few more minutes. "Just over that next rise." Evangeline looked ahead eagerly, curious to see the place that would now be her home. As they crested the hill, she caught her first glimpse of the Wade Ranch, and despite everything, she felt a flutter of hope. The ranch house was modest but well maintained, a single-story structure built of wood that had weathered to a soft gray. There was a wide porch across the front, and she could see curtains in the windows, suggesting the interior was furnished. Behind the house stood a good-sized barn, a corral with several horses, and a smaller building that must be the bunkhouse Jackson had mentioned. It was not grand, but it looked solid and welcoming, and after the hostility of redemption, that was more than enough. "It is not much," Jackson said, and she could hear a note of uncertainty in his voice, as if he worried she might be disappointed. "It is wonderful," Evangeline said honestly. "It looks like a real home." She saw his shoulders relax slightly at her words. He drove the wagon up to the house and secured the horses before coming around to help her down. His hands were gentle on her waist, steadying her as her feet touched the ground. The front door of the house opened, and a grizzled older man stepped out onto the porch. He had steel-gray hair, a weathered face, and sharp eyes that took in the scene with obvious curiosity. "Charlie," Jackson called out, "come meet my wife." To his credit, Charlie's expression barely flickered with surprise. He came down the porch steps and removed his hat politely. "Madam," he said with a nod, "this is sure a surprise. Jackson here never mentioned he was courting anyone." "It was a rather quick courtship," Evangeline said, managing a smile despite her nerves. "Well, welcome to the ranch, Mrs. Wade," Charlie said, and his tone was genuinely warm. "It will be nice to have a lady's presence around here. These two have been living like bachelors for far too long." "These two?" Evangeline questioned. As if summoned, a younger man emerged from the barn leading a horse. He was lean and dark-haired, with the kind of handsome features that probably made girls in town blush. When he saw Evangeline, he stopped short, his eyes widening. "Miguel, come meet my wife," Jackson called out. Miguel handed the horse's lead to a post and approached, his expression a mixture of surprise and cautious welcome. "Senora Wade," he said with a small bow. "This is unexpected news, but good news, yes. Congratulations to you both." "Thank you," Evangeline said, warmed by the genuine pleasure in his voice. "Miguel, would you mind putting the horses away?" Jackson asked. "I would like to get Evangeline settled inside. It has been a long day for her." "Of course, boss." Miguel moved to tend to the wagon horses, and Charlie excused himself back to whatever work he had been doing, leaving Jackson and Evangeline alone. "Come on," Jackson said, picking up her carpet bag. "Let me show you the house." He led her inside, and Evangeline looked around with interest. The interior was simple but clean, consisting of a main living area with a fireplace, a kitchen area with a large table, and two doors that presumably led to bedrooms. The furniture was handmade but sturdy, and everything was neatly organized. "It is not fancy," Jackson said, "but it is comfortable. That door there leads to my room. The other one is a spare room I have been using for storage, but we can clear it out for you." "For me?" Evangeline asked, surprised. Jackson shifted uncomfortably. "I figured you would want your own space. Like I said, this is a practical arrangement." "I am not expecting, that is, I thought you would prefer privacy." Evangeline felt a confusing mix of relief and something that might have been disappointment. Of course he would not expect her to share his bed. They were strangers who had married out of necessity, not desire. It was foolish to feel any kind of letdown about the arrangement. "That is very considerate," she said. "Thank you." "I will get the room cleared out tomorrow," Jackson said. "For tonight you can have my room and I will sleep out here on the sofa." "I cannot take your bed," Evangeline protested. "Yes, you can and you will," Jackson said firmly. "You have been traveling for weeks, you are exhausted, and you are carrying a baby. You need a proper bed more than I do. No arguments." Evangeline was too tired to fight with him. "All right, thank you. Are you hungry?" "I am not much of a cook, but I can manage some eggs and bacon." Now that he mentioned it, Evangeline realized she was starving. The biscuits Sarah had given her seemed like a lifetime ago. That sounds wonderful, actually. Jackson set about preparing the meal with the ease of someone accustomed to caring for himself. As he worked, Evangeline sat at the table and watched, trying to process everything that had happened today. This morning, she had been a homeless pariah with nowhere to turn. Now, she was a married woman with a roof over her head and a husband who, while a stranger, had shown her more kindness than anyone in recent memory. The eggs and bacon were simple but delicious, and Evangeline ate with an appetite she had not had in days. Jackson ate across from her, and they made small talk about the ranch and the surrounding area. It was all very polite and slightly awkward, like two people at a social function trying to find common ground. After the meal, Jackson showed her to his room. It was Spartan, containing just a bed, a dresser, and a washstand, but it was blessedly clean and private. "There is water in the pitcher if you want to wash up," Jackson said, "and I will bring in your bag." "Thank you, Jackson," Evangeline said, "for everything. I know I have said it already, but I do not think I can say it enough. You saved me today." He looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. "You don't need to keep thanking me. We are married now, which means we look out for each other. That is how this works." "Is it?" Evangeline asked softly. "Because I have never heard of a marriage quite like this one." "Maybe not," Jackson admitted. "But just because something is unusual does not mean it cannot work. We will figure it out as we go, all right?" "All right," Evangeline agreed, though she had no idea how two strangers were supposed to build a life together. Jackson bid her good night and closed the door behind him, leaving Evangeline alone for the first time all day. She sank down onto the bed, which was considerably more comfortable than any surface she had slept on in weeks, and finally allowed herself to fully absorb the enormity of what had happened. She was married to a cowboy named Jackson Wade, a man she had met only hours ago. A man who had seen her at her lowest point and, instead of turning away like everyone else, had offered her his name and his protection. It was madness. It was impulsive. It was quite possibly the most reckless thing she had ever done. And yet, as Evangeline lay down on the bed and felt her baby move inside her, she could not bring herself to regret it. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she and her child were safe. They had a home. They had someone who had promised to protect them. For now, that was enough. Evangeline slept deeply that night, the exhaustion of weeks of travel and stress finally catching up with her. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the window, and for a moment she was disoriented, unable to remember where she was. Then it all came back. Redemption. The hostility. Jackson's proposal. The hurried wedding. This was her new home, and the man sleeping on the sofa in the next room was her husband. She rose and washed her face in the basin, then changed into a fresh dress from her carpetbag. Looking in the small mirror above the washstand, she barely recognized herself. She looked worn and tired, dark circles under her eyes and her auburn hair escaping from its pins. But there was something else there too, a spark of determination that had been missing for weeks. She was going to make this work. Somehow, she was going to build a life here with Jackson Wade, and she was going to prove to everyone in Redemption that they had been wrong about her. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Jackson already up and dressed, standing at the stove making coffee. He turned when he heard her and offered a small smile. "Morning, how did you sleep?" "Better than I have in weeks," Evangeline admitted. "That bed is very comfortable." "Good. I am glad." He poured her a cup of coffee and handed it to her. "I was thinking, if you are feeling up to it, we should probably ride into the county seat today and get that marriage license sorted out. Make everything legal and proper." "Is it not legal as it is?" Evangeline asked, concerned. It is, technically. Reverend Blackwood is authorized to perform marriages, so the ceremony itself is binding. But having the county paperwork will make things easier down the line, especially when the baby comes. We will want everything documented properly. Evangeline appreciated his forethought. Then yes, we should go today. The ride to the county seat took most of the morning. The town, called Harrisburg, was larger than Redemption and had a much more welcoming feel to it. The courthouse was a sturdy brick building in the center of town, and the clerk who helped them with the marriage license was friendly and efficient, asking no uncomfortable questions. With the paperwork complete and filed, they were legally married in every possible way. It should have felt momentous, but mostly Evangeline just felt relieved to have one more thing settled. On the way back to the ranch, Jackson surprised her by stopping at a general store. "We should get you some supplies," he said. "Fabric for new dresses, thread, whatever you need. And anything you want for the house to make it feel more like home." Evangeline was touched by the gesture. "You do not have to do that." "I know I do not have to, I want to." He helped her down from the wagon. "Besides, you are going to need more than what is in that carpet bag, especially as the baby grows." They spent an enjoyable hour in the store, with Jackson patiently following Evangeline as she selected fabric, notions, and various household items. She tried to be practical and not spend too much, but Jackson kept encouraging her to choose things she actually wanted, not just what was cheapest. "I am not a rich man," he said when she protested, "but I do well enough. You do not need to worry about every penny." The shopkeeper, an older woman with kind eyes, smiled at them as she tallied up their purchases. "You two are newlyweds, are not you? I can always tell. There is a certain glow about new couples." Evangeline felt herself blushing, but Jackson just smiled and put his arm around her shoulders in a gesture that felt surprisingly natural. "We are indeed. Just made it official at the courthouse this morning." "How wonderful! Congratulations to you both." "And I see there is a little one on the way," the woman added, nodding at Evangeline's belly. "Double blessings." "Thank you," Evangeline said, grateful for the woman's warm acceptance, such a contrast to the reception she had received in Redemption. As they loaded their purchases into the wagon, Evangeline found herself thinking about that casual embrace, the way Jackson had put his arm around her, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. It had felt nice, comforting in a way she had not expected. "You were very convincing back there," she said as they headed back to the ranch. "Anyone would have thought we were a normal married couple." Jackson glanced at her. "Who is to say we are not? We are married, are not we? Just because we did not follow the usual path does not make it any less real." "I suppose that is true," Evangeline said thoughtfully. "Though it still feels strange sometimes calling you my husband when we barely know each other." "Then we should fix that," Jackson said. "Tell me about yourself, Evangeline Wade. Where did you grow up? What is your family like? What do you enjoy doing?" So Evangeline told him about growing up in Boston, the daughter of a merchant who had done well for himself. She told him about her education at a prestigious girls' school, about her love of reading and music, about her mother who had died when she was 15, and her father who had become more distant after that loss. And she told him about Thomas, the young man she had loved and lost, the father of her child who would never get to meet his son or daughter. To her surprise, she could speak of Thomas without crying now, though the grief was still there. A dull ache, she suspected, would never entirely fade. Jackson listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he was quiet for a moment before speaking. "He sounds like he was a good man. I am sorry you lost him." "He was, and thank you." Evangeline took a breath. "Now you tell me about yourself. You have mentioned your mother, but what about your father?" Do you have other family? Jackson's expression hardened slightly. Never knew my father. He left before I was born. My mother never would tell me much about him, except that he was a charming man who made big promises he had no intention of keeping. It was just the two of us until she died, and then it was just me. That must have been hard, being alone so young. It was what it was, Jackson said with a shrug. I learned to take care of myself, worked odd jobs until I was old enough to hire on as a ranch hand, and I have been working with cattle ever since. It is a good life, mostly. Hard work, but honest. You ever get lonely out here? Evangeline asked. Jackson considered the question. Sometimes, he admitted. Especially in the evenings when the work is done and it is just me and the silence. That is part of why I was serious when I said I was in need of a wife. I have been thinking for a while now that it was time to settle down properly, have someone to share things with. I just never expected it to happen quite like this. Neither did I, Evangeline said with a small laugh. 24 hours ago, I thought my life was over. Now I am married to a cowboy and living on a ranch in Texas. It is rather surreal. Is it what you want, though? Jackson asked, and there was genuine concern in his voice. I know you did not have much choice yesterday, and I don't want you to feel trapped. If you are unhappy, if you want something different, tell me. We can figure something out. Evangeline thought about the question seriously. Was this what she wanted? A week ago, she would have said no. She had been engaged to marry into Boston society, expecting a life of comfort and social standing. This life, on a remote Texas ranch with a man she barely knew, was about as far from that vision as possible. But that life was gone, destroyed by Thomas's death and her family's rejection. And this life, while unexpected, had its own appeal. Jackson was kind and honorable. The ranch was beautiful, and for the first time in months she felt safe. I think, she said slowly, that I am more content than I expected to be. Yesterday I was terrified and alone. Today I have a home and a husband who treats me with respect and kindness. That is more than many women can say, arranged marriage or not. Jackson smiled at that. Then we will do our best to make this work, you and I, build something good together. I would like that, Evangeline said, and meant it. The following weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. Jackson was up before dawn each day, heading out to work the ranch with Charlie and Miguel. Evangeline spent her days learning to manage the household, which was more challenging than she had anticipated. She had grown up with servants, never learning to cook or clean or do laundry. Now she had to master all these skills quickly, often through trial and error. Her first attempts at cooking were near disasters, but Charlie, who had been batching it for years, gave her some helpful pointers, and gradually she improved. She also set about making the house more of a home. With the fabric she had purchased, she sewed new curtains for the windows and made cushions for the chairs. She cleared out the spare room Jackson had given her, though she found herself spending more time in the main living area than in her own space. In the evenings, she and Jackson would sit together after dinner, talking about their days. Sometimes Jackson would read aloud from one of the books Evangeline had brought with her. Other times they would just sit in comfortable silence, Evangeline sewing while Jackson worked on mending tack or doing other small repairs. It was during one of these quiet evenings that Evangeline first felt the baby kick strongly enough that it was visible from the outside. She gasped and put her hand on her belly, and Jackson looked up in concern. "Are you all right?" he asked immediately. "Yes, it is just the baby kicking," Evangeline said with a smile. "It has been moving for a while, but this was particularly strong." Jackson looked fascinated. "Can you feel it through your hand?" "Sometimes. Do you want to try?" The offer was out before Evangeline could second-guess it. Jackson hesitated, then set aside the bridle he had been working on and came to kneel beside her chair. Evangeline took his hand and placed it on her belly where she had felt the movement. They stayed like that for a moment, both waiting, and then the baby kicked again, right against Jackson's palm. His face lit up with wonder. "I felt it," he said, sounding awed. "That is amazing." "I think the baby knows you are its father now," Evangeline said softly. "At least, that is how I choose to think of it." Jackson's eyes met hers and something passed between them, a connection deeper than anything they had shared before. "I meant what I said," he told her. "This baby is mine in every way that matters, and when it is born, I will be there for both of you, whatever you need." "I know you will," Evangeline said, and she meant it. In the weeks since their hasty marriage, Jackson had proven himself to be exactly what he claimed, an honest, hard-working man who honored his commitments. But somewhere along the way, her feelings had begun to shift. He was no longer just the stranger who had rescued her. He was Jackson, the man who brought her wildflowers he found on the range because he knew they made her smile. The man who sat up with her on nights when the baby's movements kept her awake, just to keep her company. The man whose laugh she had learned to appreciate, and whose presence had become essential to her sense of security and happiness. She was falling in love with her husband, and she had no idea if he felt anything similar for her. As summer gave way to early fall, Evangeline's pregnancy became more pronounced, and she found herself tiring more easily. Jackson, ever attentive, insisted she rest more and take on fewer chores. He even hired a woman from Harrisburg, Mrs. Chen, to come once a week to help with the heavier cleaning and laundry. Mrs. Chen was a cheerful widow who asked no uncomfortable questions, and simply accepted that Evangeline was Jackson's wife, and they were expecting a baby. She regaled Evangeline with stories of her own children and grandchildren, and offered advice about pregnancy and childbirth that Evangeline found both helpful and somewhat terrifying. It was Mrs. Chen who first suggested that perhaps Evangeline should see a doctor before the baby came. "Just to make sure everything is progressing as it should," she said kindly. "There is a good doctor in Harrisburg, Dr. Matthews. He delivered 3 of my grandchildren." Evangeline mentioned this to Jackson that evening, and he immediately agreed that it was a good idea. The next day they made the trip to Harrisburg together, and Dr. Matthews, a grandfatherly man with gentle hands and a kind manner, examined Evangeline and pronounced that everything seemed to be developing normally. "You are a healthy young woman, Mrs. Wade," he said, "and the baby seems strong. I would estimate you have about 2 more months before your time comes. Do you have someone who can attend the birth?" "I am not sure," Evangeline admitted. "I do not know many people here yet." "Mrs. Chen has assisted with several births," Dr. Matthews said. "If you are comfortable with her, I am sure she would be willing. And I can come out to the ranch if needed, though my fee for a house call is considerable." "Money is not a concern if it means Evangeline and the baby are safe," Jackson said firmly. "We would like you to be there, doctor, if that can be arranged." They made the arrangements, and Evangeline felt more at ease knowing she would have experienced help when the time came. As they drove back to the ranch, she found herself thinking about how much her life had changed in just a few short months. "You are very quiet," Jackson observed. "Is everything all right?" "I was just thinking," Evangeline said, "about how strange life is. 6 months ago, I was engaged to one man, planning a completely different future. Now I am married to you, living in Texas, about to have a baby. If someone had told me this was how things would turn out, I never would have believed them." "Are you sorry?" Jackson asked quietly. "About how things turned out? No," Evangeline said, and realized it was completely true. "I am not sorry at all. I love Thomas and I will always grieve for what we lost. But Jackson, this life with you, it is good. You are good. I am happier here than I have any right to be, given the circumstances. Jackson was silent for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I am happy too, Evangeline. Happier than I have been in longer than I can remember. You have made this house into a home, and you have given me something to look forward to at the end of each day. I know this arrangement started out as a practical thing, but somewhere along the way, it became something more for me. I care about you more than I probably should given how this all started. Evangeline's heart soared at his words. You do? I do, Jackson confirmed. I did not expect it, and I am not sure exactly when it happened, but yes, I care about you. A great deal. I care about you too, Evangeline said softly. I think I have been falling in love with you, Jackson weighed, and I did not even realize it until recently. Jackson pulled the wagon to a stop right there in the middle of the road and turned to face her fully. You love me. I do, Evangeline said, her heart pounding. I know it is sudden and maybe it is foolish considering how we started, but yes, I love you. Jackson cupped her face in his hands, his calloused thumbs gentle on her cheeks. It is not foolish, and it is not sudden, not really. We have been living as husband and wife for months now, sharing our lives and our hopes. If anything grew between us, it makes perfect sense. Then you feel it too? Evangeline asked hopefully. I love you, Evangeline, Jackson said, and then he kissed her for the first time. It was soft and sweet and perfect, nothing like the perfunctory kiss they had shared at their wedding. This was a kiss full of promise and affection, a kiss between two people who had found each other against all odds and built something real together. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. We should probably get home, Jackson said, though he made no move to pick up the reins again. Probably, Evangeline agreed, but she leaned in and kissed him again anyway. Eventually, they did make it back to the ranch, but something had shifted between them. That night, Evangeline did not retreat to her own room. Instead, she stayed in the main room with Jackson, and they talked late into the night about their feelings and their future. I want this marriage to be real, Jackson said. In every way, not just a legal arrangement but a true partnership. Is that what you want too? Yes, Evangeline said without hesitation. That is exactly what I want. Then that is what we will have, Jackson promised. He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling more content than she had thought possible. The next 2 months passed in a blur of happiness. Jackson and Evangeline grew closer each day, learning each other's quirks and preferences, building the kind of intimacy that comes from truly sharing a life. Jackson moved Evangeline's belongings into his room, and they shared the bed each night, simply holding each other and talking until sleep claimed them. Evangeline's belly grew larger, and she sometimes felt ungainly and awkward, but Jackson only seemed to find her more beautiful. He would rest his hand on her stomach to feel the baby move, and the look of wonder on his face never failed to move her. Charlie and Miguel had clearly noticed the change in their employer's demeanor. Jackson smiled more, laughed more easily, and seemed generally more content with life. Neither of them commented on it directly, but Charlie had mentioned to Evangeline that it was good to see the boss so happy. As Evangeline's time drew near, Jackson became increasingly protective. He insisted she not overexert herself, hovered anxiously whenever she showed the slightest sign of discomfort, and made sure Mrs. Chen was prepared to come at a moment's notice. The baby came on a cold November night, arriving 2 weeks earlier than Dr. Matthews had predicted. Evangeline woke to her water breaking and contractions that quickly grew intense. Jackson, who had been sleeping beside her, immediately went into action, sending Miguel racing to fetch Mrs. Chen and Dr. Matthews. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Jackson stayed by Evangeline's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement even when she was too exhausted to respond. Mrs. Chen and Dr. Matthews attended to the medical aspects, but it was Jackson's presence that gave Evangeline the strength to keep going. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, the baby was born. A boy, healthy and squalling, with a thick head of dark hair and the lungs of a future opera singer. "You have a son," Dr. Matthews said, placing the cleaned and swaddled infant in Evangeline's arms. "Congratulations." Evangeline looked down at the tiny face, this perfect little person she and Thomas had created, and felt overwhelmed with love and grief all at once. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I am your mama." Jackson, who had stepped back to give the doctor room to work, now approached cautiously. "May I?" he asked. Evangeline nodded, and Jackson carefully took the baby into his arms. The infant quieted at once, seeming to recognize the voice that had been talking to him through Evangeline's belly for months. "Hello, son," Jackson said softly, and there was such tenderness in his voice that Evangeline felt tears stream down her face. "Welcome to the world. You are going to be loved so much, I promise you that. What will you name him?" Mrs. Chen asked. Evangeline and Jackson had discussed this, though they had not reached a final decision. Now, looking at Jackson holding their son, Evangeline knew exactly what the name should be. "Thomas," she said. "Thomas Jackson Wade, for the father who gave him life and the father who will raise him." Jackson's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Are you sure?" "I am sure," Evangeline said. "It honors them both and it feels right." "Thomas Jackson Wade," Jackson repeated, testing the name. The baby yawned widely and Jackson smiled. "I think he approves." Dr. Matthews and Mrs. Chen stayed for a few more hours, making sure both mother and baby were stable and healthy. Before they left, Dr. Matthews pulled Jackson aside. "You have a fine family, Mr. Wade," the doctor said. "That boy is lucky to have a father like you." "I am the lucky one," Jackson replied. "Thank you for everything, doctor." After their guests departed, Jackson helped Evangeline get settled more comfortably in bed, with the baby sleeping in a cradle beside her that Charlie had built weeks ago in anticipation. "How are you feeling?" Jackson asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Exhausted," Evangeline admitted, "and sore, but happy, so very happy." "Get some rest," Jackson said. "I will watch over you both." "You need to sleep too," Evangeline protested weakly. "I will. But right now, I just want to sit here and look at you two, and thank whatever forces in the universe brought us together." Evangeline smiled and closed her eyes, feeling safe and loved. She drifted off to sleep with Jackson's hand holding hers and their son sleeping peacefully nearby. The first few weeks with a newborn were challenging in ways Evangeline had not anticipated. Thomas was a good baby overall, but he needed to be fed every few hours, day and night, and Evangeline found herself constantly exhausted. Jackson helped as much as he could, changing diapers, walking the floor with Thomas when he was fussy, and taking over household tasks so Evangeline could rest. Charlie and Miguel were surprisingly helpful as well. Charlie carved little wooden toys for the baby, and Miguel would sing soft Spanish lullabies when he came in from working, which never failed to soothe Thomas into sleep. As winter deepened, they settled into a new routine. Evangeline would feed Thomas in the early morning, then Jackson would hold the baby while she ate breakfast. During the day, while Jackson worked outside, Evangeline would care for Thomas and manage the household as best she could. In the evenings, they would sit together as a family, taking turns holding the baby and marveling at how much he was growing and changing. On Christmas Eve, their first as a family, Jackson surprised Evangeline with a gift. It was a beautiful shawl, hand-knitted in an intricate pattern, with a note explaining he had commissioned it from a woman in Harrisburg months ago, wanting Evangeline to have something special for their first Christmas together. Evangeline was deeply touched, especially since she had not expected gifts. She had made Jackson a new shirt, embroidered with his initials, which he pronounced to be the finest shirt he had ever owned. But the real gift was simply being together, the three of them, warm and safe and happy despite the cold wind howling outside. Jackson built up the fire and they sat close to it, Thomas sleeping peacefully between them. "A year ago I was alone in this house," Jackson said quietly. "I had no idea that in 12 months I would have a wife and a son. Life is strange sometimes. A year ago I was planning a wedding to another man," Evangeline said. "I had no idea that my life was about to fall apart and then be rebuilt into something completely different. But Jackson, I would not change any of it, not if it meant not ending up here with you." "Not even the hard parts?" Jackson asked. "The judgment, the cruelty of those people in redemption," Evangeline considered this. "Not even those parts," she said finally, "because they led me to you. If the people of redemption had shown me kindness, if someone had given me a room or offered help, you might never have felt compelled to step in. We might never have married, never built this life together. So no, I would not change it." Jackson leaned over and kissed her gently. "I love you," Evangeline weighed. "I love you too," she replied. "More than I can say." Winter gave way to spring, and Thomas grew from a tiny infant into a chubby, happy baby who smiled at everyone and had already wrapped the entire household around his little finger. He had Evangeline's green eyes but darker hair, and his features were a perfect blend of both his parents. One warm April afternoon, as Evangeline was hanging laundry and watching Thomas play on a blanket in the yard, she heard the sound of a wagon approaching. Visitors were rare this far from town, so she picked up Thomas and walked around to the front of the house to see who had come. To her complete shock, she recognized her father's carriage pulling up to the house. And stepping down from it was her father himself, looking older and more tired than she remembered. "Papa," Evangeline breathed, hardly believing her eyes. Her father turned and saw her, and his expression crumpled. "Evangeline," he said, his voice breaking. "Oh, my dear girl." Before she could respond, he had crossed the distance between them and pulled her into an embrace, carefully mindful of the baby in her arms. He was crying, something Evangeline had never seen him do. "I am so sorry," he said into her hair. "So terribly, terribly sorry for how I treated you, for what I said, for sending you away. Can you ever forgive me?" Evangeline felt her own tears falling. "Papa, what are you doing here? How did you even find me?" "I hired investigators," her father admitted, pulling back to look at her. "It took months, but I had to find you, had to tell you how wrong I was. When you left, I was so caught up in what people would think, in protecting the family reputation, that I failed to protect my own daughter. I have regretted it every single day since." Jackson had emerged from the barn, alerted by the commotion. He approached cautiously, clearly unsure what was happening. "Papa, this is my husband, Jackson Wade," Evangeline said. "Jackson, this is my father, Robert Porter." The two men sized each other up, and Evangeline could feel the tension in the air. Her father had sent her away in disgrace, and Jackson had rescued her. There was a lot of history and emotion packed into this moment. "Mr. Wade," her father said finally, extending his hand. "I owe you a debt I can never repay. You gave my daughter a home and protection when I failed to do so. You married her when her own family turned their backs. I am humbled by your generosity and ashamed of my own cowardice." Jackson shook his hand, his expression still guarded. "I did what any decent man should have done. Evangeline deserved better than she was getting." "She did," Robert agreed. "She deserved better from me most of all." He turned back to Evangeline. "I do not expect you to forgive me immediately. I know I have hurt you deeply. But I had to come, had to see you, had to meet my grandchild." He looked at the baby in Evangeline's arms with wonder. "May I?" Evangeline hesitated only a moment before carefully transferring Thomas to her father's arms. Robert looked down at the infant with tears streaming down his face. "He is beautiful," he whispered. "Just beautiful. What is his name?" "Thomas Jackson Wade," Evangeline said. "Thomas for his biological father, Jackson for the man raising him." Robert nodded, understanding the significance. "It is a good name, a strong name." He looked up at Jackson. "You are raising him as your own." "He is my own," Jackson said firmly. "In every way that matters." "Then he is a lucky boy," Robert said. "Luckier than he would have been if Thomas Sr. had lived and married Evangeline. That young man was weak and spoiled, truth be told. This boy has a real father, a man of character and strength." They invited Robert inside, and over coffee, he explained that he had been searching for Evangeline ever since he learned that Aunt Martha had died before Evangeline arrived. The guilt had been eating at him, wondering if his daughter was safe, if she had anywhere to go. "When I finally tracked you here and learned you had married, I did not know what to expect," Robert admitted. "I feared you had been forced into some terrible situation. But I can see that is not the case. You are happy, are not you, Evangeline?" "I am," Evangeline said, reaching for Jackson's hand. "Happier than I have ever been. This life might not be what I planned, but it is good and it is real, and I have a husband who loves me and treats me with respect and kindness. That is all I ever wanted for you," Robert said. "Well, that and the social standing that came with marrying Thomas, but I can see now how shallow and foolish those priorities were. What good is social standing if you are not happy? What good is money if you do not have love?" He stayed for 3 days, getting to know Jackson and the ranch, spending time with his grandson, and rebuilding his relationship with Evangeline. It was not easy, and there were difficult conversations about the past and the hurt that had been caused. But by the time he left, they had reached an understanding and a tentative reconciliation. "I would like to visit again, if that would be all right," Robert said as he prepared to leave. "And I hope you will write to me, let me know how you and the baby are doing." "We would like that," Evangeline said. "Both of us." She glanced at Jackson, who nodded his agreement. "And Mr. Wade, I mean what I said. If you ever need anything, financial help or business connections or anything at all, you have only to ask. It is the least I can do after what you have done for my daughter." "We are doing fine on our own," Jackson said, "but I appreciate the offer, and I will keep it in mind." After her father left, Evangeline and Jackson sat on the porch, watching the sunset and reflecting on the unexpected visit. "Are you glad he came?" Jackson asked. "I am," Evangeline said. "I did not realize how much I needed to hear him say he was sorry and that he was wrong. It does not erase the hurt, but it helps." "He seemed genuinely remorseful," Jackson observed. "He did. And I think he was impressed by you, by the life we have built here." Jackson snorted. "I am just a cowboy with a small ranch. Nothing impressive about that." "You are so much more than that," Evangeline said, turning to face him. "You are the man who saw someone in need and helped, even though it cost you your freedom and independence. You are the man who married a pregnant stranger and raised her child as your own without a moment's hesitation. You are the man I love with all my heart, Jackson Wade, and there is everything impressive about that." Jackson pulled her close and kissed her thoroughly. I love you too, he murmured against her lips. You and Thomas both. You are my family, and I would do anything for you. I know, Evangeline said. That is why I am the luckiest woman alive. As the years passed, the Wade family continued to grow and thrive. Evangeline gave birth to 2 more children, a daughter named Sarah in honor of the kind girl who had helped her in redemption, and another son, Robert, named for her father who had become a regular visitor and doting grandfather. The ranch prospered under Jackson's management, growing larger and more successful. He took on more hands as the herd expanded and built a bigger house to accommodate their growing family. Evangeline became known in the area as a skilled seamstress and often took in orders for dresses and shirts, enjoying the creative work and the extra income. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the ranch and followed his father everywhere. Jackson taught him to ride, to rope, to care for the animals, all the while making sure the boy knew he was loved and valued. When Thomas was 6, he asked Jackson if he was his real father. Jackson had taken the boy aside and explained, gently and honestly, that another man had given him life, but that Jackson had chosen to be his father and would be for the rest of his life. Biology does not make a father, Jackson told him. Love and commitment do. And I love you and am committed to you, always. Thomas had hugged him fiercely and declared that Jackson was the best father in the world, and that was the end of the discussion as far as he was concerned. One spring day, when Thomas was 8 and they were preparing for Sarah's 6th birthday party, a stranger rode up to the ranch. He was a well-dressed man on a fine horse, and he asked to speak to Mrs. Wade. Evangeline met him on the porch, curious and slightly wary. I am Mrs. Wade. How can I help you? My name is William Sheridan, the man said, removing his hat politely. I was a friend of Thomas Aldrich, your former fiancé. I was away traveling when he died, and I only recently learned the full story of what happened to you. I came to offer my apologies for how his family treated you, and to see if there was anything I could do to help. Evangeline was surprised and touched by the gesture. That is very kind, Mr. Sheridan, but as you can see, I am doing quite well. I have a husband and a family and a good life. I can see that, William said with a smile. And I am glad. Thomas would have been happy to know his son was being raised in such a loving home. I assume that boy over there, he gestured to where Thomas was playing with his younger siblings, is Thomas's child. He is, Evangeline confirmed. His name is Thomas Jackson Wade. A good name. He looks happy. He is, we all are. William reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a bundle of papers. Before I go, I wanted to give you these. They are letters that Thomas wrote to me about you before he died. He loved you very much, Mrs. Wade. I thought you might want to have them to share with your son someday so he knows his biological father was a good man who would have loved him. Evangeline took the letters with trembling hands, moved by the unexpected gift. Thank you, Mr. Sheridan. This means more than you know. It is the least I could do. Thomas was my friend and you were important to him. I wish you and your family all the best, Mrs. Wade. After he left, Evangeline sat on the porch and read through the letters, tears streaming down her face as she read Thomas's words of love and devotion, his plans for their future, his excitement about the idea of starting a family someday. It was bittersweet, remembering the love they had shared and the life they had planned, but it was also healing in a way she had not expected. Jackson found her there an hour later, and she showed him the letters. He read through them quietly, then put his arm around her. He was a good man, Jackson said, and he loved you. I am glad you have these. Are you not jealous? Evangeline asked. Of a man who has been dead for nearly a decade. No, He was your first love, and you have every right to remember him fondly. It does not change what we have now." "What we have now is everything," Evangeline said, leaning into his embrace. "You are everything, Jackson. I love Thomas, but what we had was young love, untested by real hardship. What you and I have, we built it from nothing, through struggle and uncertainty and hard work. It is real and deep and lasting." "I feel the same way," Jackson said. "You are my heart, Evangeline. You and our children. I cannot imagine my life without you." "Then it is a good thing you will never have to," Evangeline said, and kissed him with all the love and passion that 9 years of marriage had only deepened. That evening, they gathered the children and showed Thomas the letters from his biological father. The boy read them with wide eyes, clearly moved by the words of a man he would never meet. "He sounds like he was nice," Thomas said when he finished. "He was," Evangeline confirmed. "He would have loved you very much if he had lived to meet you." "But he did not live, and Pa did," Thomas said with the straightforward logic of a child. "And Pa is the one who teaches me things and plays with me and tucks me in at night. So Pa is my real father, right?" "Right," Jackson said, his voice thick with emotion. "And you are my real son. Always." "Good," Thomas said, satisfied with this answer, and went back to playing with his siblings as if nothing momentous had just occurred. Evangeline and Jackson looked at each other and smiled. Their family might have started in unconventional circumstances, but it was real and strong and full of love. As the children grew older, they occasionally asked about why they had never visited Redemption, the town just a few hours away. Evangeline and Jackson had carefully avoided the place, conducting all their business in Harrisburg instead. Finally, when Thomas was 10, he asked directly why they never went there. Jackson and Evangeline exchanged glances, and then Evangeline explained, in terms the children could understand, that the people of Redemption had not been kind to her when she first arrived in Texas, and so they preferred to do business elsewhere. "Were they mean because of me?" Thomas asked, his young face troubled. "Because you were going to have a baby and were not married yet. They were mean because they were judgmental and unkind," Jackson said firmly. "It had nothing to do with you, son. You did nothing wrong. They were the ones in the wrong." "Well, they were stupid," Sarah declared with the fierce loyalty of a 6-year-old. "Mama is the best mama in the world, and anyone who is mean to her is just dumb." "You should not call people dumb, sweetheart," Evangeline said, though she was secretly pleased by her daughter's defense. "But it is true," Sarah insisted. "Right, Papa?" "In this case, yes, it is true," Jackson agreed with a smile. "Now, who wants to help me check on the new foal in the barn?" The subject was dropped, but it came up again a few months later in an unexpected way. Evangeline and Jackson had taken the children to Harrisburg for supplies, and they ran into Sarah Coleman, the girl who had shown Evangeline kindness all those years ago. Sarah, now married with children of her own, was delighted to see them. "Mrs. Wade, I have thought about you so many times over the years, wondering how you were doing, and look at your beautiful family." The two women caught up, and Sarah shared some interesting news. "Redemption has changed a lot in the past few years," she said. "Mayor Watkins died, and there is a new mayor now, much more progressive. And Reverend Blackwood retired and moved to live with his daughter. The new reverend is young and actually practices what he preaches about Christian charity. It is a much more welcoming place now." "That is good to hear," Evangeline said politely, though she had no intention of testing this new welcoming atmosphere. But fate had other plans. A few weeks later, Charlie came down with a serious illness, and Dr. Matthews, after examining him, said he needed a specialist who only came through Redemption on his circuit. "I can take him," Jackson said immediately. "We will both take him," Evangeline corrected. "Charlie is family. We will make sure he gets the care he needs." So they found themselves, for the first time in 10 years, driving into Redemption with Charlie in the back of the wagon, wrapped in blankets despite the summer heat. The town had indeed changed. There were new buildings, new businesses, and the overall atmosphere seemed less oppressive than Evangeline remembered. They located the doctor's office easily, and Jackson helped Charlie inside while Evangeline waited with the wagon. As she sat there, several women walked by, giving her curious glances but no outright hostility. One woman even nodded politely. It was strange, being back in the place where she had experienced such cruelty and finding it so different. The door to the general store opened, and a man emerged who looked vaguely familiar. It took Evangeline a moment to place him as one of the town council members who had confronted her that terrible day. He recognized her too, and to her surprise, he approached the wagon. "Mrs. Wade." "I do not know if you remember me. I am Thomas Greeley." "I remember," Evangeline said cautiously. He had the grace to look ashamed. "I wanted to apologize for how we treated you when you first came to town. It has weighed on my conscience for years. What we did was wrong, and I am deeply sorry for my part in it." Evangeline was stunned. "I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Greeley. It takes courage to admit when you were wrong." "It was cowardice that made me wrong in the first place," he said. Going along with the crowd, joining in the judgment without knowing the facts or considering the consequences. "I am glad to see you have done well despite how we treated you. Your husband seems like a good man." "He is the best of men," Evangeline said firmly. "I am sure." "Well, I will not keep you. I just wanted to say my piece and let you know that not everyone in Redemption is proud of what happened that day." After he left, Evangeline sat with her thoughts, trying to process this unexpected apology. It did not erase the pain of the past, but it did help, knowing that at least some people recognized they had been wrong. Jackson emerged from the doctor's office a while later with better news than they had hoped. The specialist had examined Charlie and prescribed medication that should have him feeling better within a few days. He would need to rest and take it easy for a while, but he was going to be fine. As they prepared to leave town, Evangeline told Jackson about the encounter with Mr. Greeley. Jackson listened thoughtfully, then said, "People can change, I suppose. It does not mean we need to forget what they did, but maybe we can acknowledge that they are trying to be better." "I think that is fair," Evangeline agreed. They made a few more trips to Redemption over the following months, as Charlie needed follow-up appointments with the specialist. Each time, they encountered more people who seemed genuinely regretful about the past. The new reverend even approached them to apologize on behalf of the church, and to invite them to services if they ever felt so inclined. Evangeline appreciated the apologies, but she felt no desire to become part of the Redemption community. Harrisburg had been good to them, and that was where their friends and connections were. Redemption could change all it wanted, but it would never be home. Home was the ranch, with Jackson and their children, with Charlie and Miguel and Mrs. Chen, and all the others who had become their extended family over the years. Home was the life they had built together, against all odds, out of a desperate situation that could have destroyed them, but instead had forged them into something stronger. One evening, as Evangeline and Jackson sat on the porch watching the sunset, something they had been doing for over a decade now, Evangeline reflected on how far they had come. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Marrying me so impulsively, taking on all my problems and complications?" Jackson pulled her closer. "Not for a single moment. That day in Redemption was the best day of my life, even if it did not seem like it at the time. I got you, I got Thomas. I got this whole beautiful life we have built. How could I ever regret that? I used to wonder if you only married me out of some sense of obligation or pity, Evangeline admitted, because of what happened to your mother. Is that what you think? Jackson asked, turning to look at her. Not anymore, Evangeline assured him. I know you love me, I have known for years. But I used to wonder, especially in the beginning. I will be honest with you, Jackson said. When I first saw you on that street, yes, I was thinking about my mother and how no one helped her. That was my initial motivation. But Evangeline, the moment I actually talked to you, saw your courage and your dignity in the face of all that cruelty, I was already half in love with you. I might have married you out of a sense of obligation to my mother's memory, but I fell in love with you for who you are. And every day since has only made me love you more. Evangeline felt tears prick at her eyes, the good kind. I love you too, so much. You saved me in every way a person can be saved. We saved each other, Jackson corrected. You gave me something I did not even know I was missing. A family, a purpose, a reason to build something lasting. Before you, I was just going through the motions. Now I am living. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching their children play in the yard as the sky turned brilliant shades of orange and pink. Do you think Thomas will stay on the ranch when he grows up? Evangeline asked. Or will he want to do something else? I think he will make his own choice, whatever that might be, Jackson said. And we will support him either way. That is what parents do. You are a wonderful father, Evangeline said. To all of them, but especially to Thomas. Raising another man's child is not easy, and you have done it with such grace and love. He is my son, Jackson said simply. Has been since the day he was born. The biology does not matter. As if summoned by their conversation, Thomas ran up to the porch, his face flushed with excitement. Pa, can you show me how to do that rope trick again? The one where you make the loop spin? Sure, son, come on. Jackson stood and ruffled the boy's hair affectionately. You coming, Evangeline? In a minute, she said with a smile. I just want to sit here and appreciate this for a moment. She watched as Jackson and Thomas walked toward the barn, their similar postures and easy companionship, a testament to the bond they shared. Sarah and little Robert were playing near the corral, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. This was her life now. Not the one she had planned, not the one she had thought she wanted, but infinitely better because it was real and it was hers, and it was full of love. Evangeline thought back to that desperate girl who had arrived in Redemption 10 years ago, pregnant and alone and terrified. That girl had thought her life was over. She could never have imagined that the worst day of her life would turn into the beginning of the best thing that ever happened to her. The town had been ready to ruin her name, to drive her out into the unknown with nowhere to go and no one to help her. And a cowboy, a stranger with kind eyes and a good heart, had married her before they could even speak more than a few words to each other. It had been reckless and impulsive and completely against everything she had been taught about proper behavior. And it had been exactly what both of them needed. Jackson Wade had given her a home, a name, and a future. In return, she had given him a family and a heart full of love. Together, they had built something beautiful out of desperate circumstances, proving that sometimes the most unconventional beginnings lead to the most extraordinary lives. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Evangeline stood and walked toward her family, toward the barn where Jackson was teaching Thomas rope tricks while Sarah and Robert begged to learn too. This was where she belonged, with these people who loved her and whom she loved in return. The past was behind her with all its pain and loss and struggle. The future stretched ahead, full of promise and possibility. And the present, this perfect moment, was all she needed. She had been saved by a cowboy with a good heart and a strong sense of justice. And in saving her, he had saved himself from a lonely existence, finding instead a love that would last a lifetime and beyond. It was not the fairy tale she had once dreamed of, but it was real and true and more fulfilling than any fairy tale could ever be. And as Evangeline joined her family in the barn, laughing as Jackson tried to teach all 3 children the rope trick at once, she knew she would not change a single moment of their story, not even the hard parts. Because all of it, every struggle and every triumph, every tear and every laugh had led them here. To this place, this moment, this life. Together. And that was the greatest happy ending she could have ever asked for.